There are many things that can cause a crisis. Lots of them are in the environment in which we operate. But what about the internal environment? What's going on inside of our organisation? How can we identify potential sources of threat there? That's what I want to think about in this session. I want to think about environmental scanning in general, very briefly. Think about the different internal sources of crisis that we might encounter inside our own organisation, and suggest just a quick tweak of an old familiar tool, a SWOT analysis, that could help us understand that internal environment better and better predict threats to our organisation. So let's just think about environmental scanning. Routinely, as part of our strategic planning process, we as an organisation are engaging in environmental scanning activities. We're looking at things inside and outside the organisation that might represent opportunities or threats for the organisation. The same logic applies to being crisis ready. We need to understand both environments. Some sources of threat come from outside the organisation. Kraft Foods, for example, in the US, responded very efficiently to changes in the law, which meant in order to combat obesity, fat and sugar levels had to be reduced in many of their products. They anticipated the potential crisis that might come from that legal change better than other organisations. But it was very much an outside world threat, an external one. Other threats come from within the organisation itself. The Challenger shuttle disaster, yes, it was a component failure, but the main lesson from the crisis management literature in terms of Challenger is actually it was a management decision error. The risk of Challenger exploding on takeoff was grossly underestimated, and that's how the disaster happened. So there's all of these different things outside and inside the organisation. I'd like to suggest that simple tools we use every day can help us understand both types of threat much better. And I want to think about this in the context of the internal organisation in this session in particular. Internal sources of crises are very, very important. Lots of problems are caused by ourselves. They're of our own making because we're not managing things efficiently. We're used to external threats, the economic downturn, the volcanic ash crisis affecting aircraft across Europe, and so on. But in many cases, it's the enemy within which is the problem. Threats can come from all sorts of sources internally. User error, the 3 Mile Island disaster, careless remarks, a chief exec of P&G making very silly comments in the media about how the symbol can look satanic. Poor risk assessment, Challenger again, and other examples. Employee misbehaviour, Domino's pizza workers who found it funny to pick their nose, contaminate food, video it and put it on YouTube, and so on. There's lots of threats within, and we need to understand them better. Many of the tools we use as managers every day can help us do this. I'd like to suggest we just take one that just about everyone in a business school and everyone in a commercial organisation or a public sector organisation has heard of, the SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. The CM, or the crisis management SWOT, is just a subtle variation on that. Here's the standard SWOT. 4 cells, as many of these matrices have. The environment, internal and external, is represented down the left-hand side, and across the bottom we have the positive and negative factors. We're all very used to this. So strengths are internal positive things, weaknesses are internal negative things. Opportunities are external positive things, and threats are external negative things. Standard SWOT, bread and butter, we all probably use it all of the time as a matter of routine. The crisis management SWOT is subtly different. In fact, it's one word different. Now we're thinking about negative right across the piece along the bottom of the matrix. So we're thinking about negative consequences that might come from things that were once positive? Let me elaborate with a couple of cells that are affected by this considerably. SWOT is designed to be optimistic on two of its dimensions: the strengths, what we're good at internally, and the opportunities, things out there that might be really good for us. But both of those things have a downside, and that's what the CM SWOT is trying to capture. It's asking questions, well, what if these strengths we've got were suddenly to disappear? Perhaps because of rapid changes in technology or something like that. And what if that wonderful market opportunity that we're going to try to exploit, what if it went wrong? What would happen to us then? That's the logic we're trying to apply in the crisis management SWOT. So, in terms of strengths, well, an example strength any SWOT analysis might come out with could be, we're a fast-growing company and the projections are still very, very helpful. Well, there are downsides to that. We could lose control of operations, particularly if we're expanding too rapidly, relying on international outsourcing, and so on. We could leave ourselves exposed to threats of product quality or of component supply, damage to our brand reputation if our expansion involves less ethical or lower quality partners in strategic alliances, and so on. There are things that can go wrong with being fast growing, in other words. Another strength might be we have a unique product or service with great level of differentiation. Well, what if that uniqueness hasn't been adequately tested and something goes wrong? For example, there's a product that has seemed safe for a while, suddenly harms a consumer. Breast implant scares in recent years have been an example of that, but there are many, many others. What if someone else just muscles into the market and wipes out our product overnight in terms of differentiation? And then there's the more human side of strengths. SWOT analyses in successful companies very often focus on charismatic and inspirational leaders. Great, but there are risks associated with that too. If they're that charismatic, inspirational, someone else may want them and they may leave and they may take other people with them. Sometimes they become too powerful because they're so charismatic, and so their decisions are not challenged as rigorously as they should be by, say, senior management, the board of directors, leading to errors of judgment, and so on. So lots of strengths, but things that can go wrong. Adopting a CM SWOT mindset will help us think about those. Same in terms of the opportunities, which is typically externally focused, but it has an internal dimension too. So, for example, many retailers moved from bricks and mortar operations because there was an opportunity there to develop multi-channel bricks and clicks strategies. Great, but what if the particular model we adopted were to go wrong? What if there were external security threats to data and customer details because internally we'd adopted the wrong system? What if that in turn undermined consumer confidence? What if people then started to attack the system and the systems and processes that we'd selected were vulnerable to hacking? These are things internally that could go wrong. Outsourcing is a particular minefield in terms of external opportunities becoming internal problems. There's lots of examples where interference from host country governments, for instance, has changed the way firms have had to operate. Legislation changes locally in an offshore context might suddenly mean a particular type of operation has to change. Again, unwise selection of strategic partners, and so on. In fact, the whole outsourcing thing, my third point, is particularly important. It can be about business ethics, it can be about product quality, it can be about HR practices, it can be about intellectual property rights. A whole host of things could go wrong and affect us internally when we're trying to exploit that external opportunity. Again, CM SWOT will help us get a handle on that. So don't just do a SWOT analysis in the normal way as part of your strategic planning. If you want to be crisis ready, do a CM SWOT analysis too. Always look on the dark side of life. not just the bright side. So remember, environmental scanning, knowing what's going on out there and in here, is crucial if we want to develop a crisis planning mindset. Internal sources of crises can be just as severe, if not more severe, than the external ones. We need to understand what's going on within our own organisation and within the organisations of key strategic partners and stakeholders. And the everyday tools that we're using all of the time, such as a SWOT analysis, can very easily be applied to crisis planning too. Remember, every plus has a negative. Every strength and opportunity has a potential weakness and threat. Get into the habit as part of planning of looking on that black side and thinking, what could go wrong?